All right, so we are live and recording. Welcome to everyone, whoever's listening or watching. My name is Rahul, and this is the third episode on the Brevity hypothesis um, channel or podcast, whichever you are listening to. So today I have a very interesting person with me to talk about something that I am personally very passionate about, and that is product management. So I have been fascinated by the field for quite some time now. It's close to 2 years since I've been researching about it and trying to get to know as much as possible. And so I felt that the best person to kind of give this introductory session and overview about everything that you need to know to get started with product management has to be Sujana. So Sujana is someone who I have known with in one of my previous organizations, as well as she has worked with me as a product manager in one of my recent teams in ThoughtWorks. So I felt that given our relationship working together and her experience that I have seen over the last 4 to 4.5 years, I felt that this is exactly what we needed to get in front of our audiences. So before we get started, just a quick note to everyone who's listening: whatever opinions or experiences or any pointers that you take away from this show or this episode are purely derived from our personal experiences. They are not any anything that have to do with any organization that we may have worked for or are working for. So it's just purely based on experience. So wanted to get that out there. And on that note, let's get started. So welcome, Sujana. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rahul. Thanks for having me, especially on a topic that's very close to my heart as well, product management.
Awesome. So thank you for giving some time to this, Sujana. So on that note, I think we'll just quickly jump into it. Let's start by talking a little bit about yourself and your experience. I think it's best if we can hear about it from yourself. So if you can just give some idea to the audience around who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Sure, Rahul. So now currently I'm a product management principal at ThoughtWorks. And it's been almost close to 17 years that I've been in the industry now. I originally started as a developer. So for the initial 6-7 years, I was actually doing active development. And at that point in time, I was mainly into Microsoft technologies. I worked in initially VBA, that's what's called Visual Basic for Applications, and then .NET, and then moved on to Java. And then I did some build scripting for a while, right? Then at a point in my career, I felt that, okay, probably I'll make a better business analyst, right? So that's when I kind of shifted to being a business analyst. And moreover, I think that was also very inspired by how one of my clients in my earlier days saw me as, right, not just as a developer, but also somebody who can analyze the requirements and take it forward. So that's when I kind of shifted my career from being a developer into a business analyst. And from there on, I started taking multiple roles, as you could imagine, in terms of a progression, right, in a project manager, a program manager, delivery manager. Of late, the past 6 years, right, especially when in my previous organization, we kind of decided to go down the route of a product and probably a fresh product, right? That's when I started exploring this role of product management itself, right? So now for the past 6-7 years, I've been into product management at the core, and I love doing it. And I would wish to definitely continue on this path. So that's a very quick introduction about my IT journey itself, Rahul.
Great. Thanks, Sujana, for that. So over the last a decade or so, since you kind of gotten deeper into what product management is, of course there are a lot of textbookish definitions to product management, right? There is the classic definition that a product manager is the CEO of a company, or there is the classic Venn diagram that a PM sits in between business, tech, and UX, right? These are very good to get started on, but generally speaking, probably based on your own experience, how has your definition or perception of product management shaped over the years?
Sure. So as I told you, when I started taking up product management as a role and a title, that was about 6 years ago, when my previous organization decided to go down the route of building a product of our own. So initially, to start with, I was the only person, right, as a product manager. So I was running silo as a product manager, basically just trying to understand first, okay, what to do, right? What product should we build? So those were these initial times. But just prior to that, I was actually playing a delivery manager role, right? Where it's more about, account mining and handling delivery for a large account and things like that. So when I just shifted to this particular responsibility, initially I had, to be very honest, I had my own struggle in terms of trying to understand, okay, what should be the major portion of my daily activity, right? Because as a project manager or as a delivery manager, there are a lot of things that you'll have to, kind of keep perfectly aligned at the same point in time, right? You'll have to look at the velocity of your team, right? You'll have to take a look at your delivery timelines, right? In terms of quality metrics, and there are a lot of other things, right? So now when it comes into product management, right, initially, at least for the initial few months or even a year, right, it was a little difficult to see, what are those things that are very important from a product management perspective, right? So as you rightly said, right, a product manager is a CEO. The usual definition that we find is actually is a CEO of the product. And I do kind of, agree to that to a greater extent, mainly not from a fancy title perspective, but in terms of, where it gives the essence of somebody who is responsible to liaise with practically with every individual who is going to be deeply involved in the progression of the product and making sure the product eventually turns out to something that actually brings out the actual outcomes or the values that the product is being built for, right? Because it's no longer about the hierarchy or those typical structures that we have. So a product manager is more who is always kind of brutally honest towards the problem statement that we're trying to solve and driving that forward, right? We have this very great saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility, but the vice versa is not true, right? Product manager, if it was it is a role with a great responsibility, but power doesn't come with responsibility. So unless, and what I've seen in my experience is, unless the product manager is empowered, right? Empowered to take decisions in terms of, what should be the priority, how should the roadmap be, right? What should go in at a particular point in time. Only then I've seen it kind of in my experience, right, really relate in greater value for the product, for the business, and more valuable for the customers who are going to use it, right? So in a way, from the perspective of, owning and seeing everything, keeping an eye on everything that's important for the business outcome, I do kind of agree. I like the definition, right, sometimes that the industry uses, that a product manager is like the CEO of the product, because that kind of really resonates very well to me when I was playing at the role, actually.
Okay, so your point about being empowered, I think, is it fair to say that product managers require the capability to influence without authority, because like there's no direct fancy title that is given to you. Probably your powers are not as impactful as that of a CEO, or that evident as that of a CEO, but probably to be able to influence without authority, like there is no direct managerial position that's given to you. Probably you work with a lot of different verticals, like sales, marketing, tech support, customer experience. So is it fair to say that it's similar to that statement, that aligns with it?
Yeah, I would largely agree, because I think, it's basically bringing in, because when I was handling the product, right, initially it was just me, and as you rightly said, and then started bringing in a simple trio, right, with a designer, with a tech strategist, right, and then slowly started building up sales and a marketing team, and then a customer success team. And so, as you rightly said, kind of, keeping everything in alignment. And most importantly, when I say empower, right, it's also about, for example, to decide for what is going to get into a particular product feature, right? The product manager does have, is responsible to do the necessary homework for the product market fit, right? So that shouldn't demand an approval for somebody in a very typical project setup, right? Or in a typical consulting or a service setup, right? Because that is a typical service mindset, right? But in a product management, I think, where there is more flexibility and control and autonomy, I think, products managers can actually work at it at their best. That's what I've seen personally in my experience.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, over the last few years, I think there are as we get deeper into the field, probably based on your experience, you might have come across situations where something that you perceive to be true about product management turned out to be false, or something that you or vice versa as well. So when it comes to this role, I think especially in India, for that matter, this role is still growing. There is still not a lot of exposure and a lot of awareness around this. So it's still a booming industry. So are there any common myths or misconceptions about the role that you would like to kind of help debunk and clarify, Sujana?
Sure, Rahul. First one is product manager, project manager, they share the same what do you say, abbreviation, right? Also the acronym, right? Both are called PM, but the first misconception or myth is actually a product manager and a project manager definitely not one and the same, right? This is where I felt most of the differences kind of lie in, right? When sometimes while I was playing the product manager role, I'm still playing the role, but earlier during my career, when I initially had to take that up, right, I had confusions myself in terms of maybe a product manager is a project manager also, who has to take care of execution, delivery, timelines, and things like that, right? But the more a product manager's daily activity is kind of filled in with certain set of activities in order to drive everyday execution or just maintaining the backlog and things like that, I think the lesser it gives the time and scope for a product manager to think about, the market insights, the competitive analysis, and more and things like that, right? So first, definitely hand off a little from the core basic execution and delivery related activities. So it's not a project management. I think it's very different from what a project management is. And there are very few significant reasons also that I would like to point out for that as well, because sometimes our teams are actually valued on a typical service setup. Our teams are valued based on velocity, right? In terms of productivity, right? How much lines of code somebody writes, or how many stories are you able to deliver in a particular iteration or in a sprint, right? But as a product manager, I think the thinking first has to change, where it's no longer about velocity, it's about value, right? It's more about value in terms of how you and your team are working together in order to get the required output. The feature might be a very, very small feature, right? Not significant at all, right? In terms of a productivity perspective, how you could rate that, but in terms of value or benefit that it brings might be great. So that's what we've seen in the industry, right? But so that was a first mind shift for me, right? So no longer it should be like, okay, hasn't the team delivered a bulky feature or anything like that? So it's the first differentiation is definitely around velocity versus value. And the next thing is, as a typical project manager, you're always focused on risks like time, cost, and scope, right? These are your main risks, right? You're always looking at only these three, right? Of course, and that's the responsibility of a project manager as well. But as a product manager, I don't think so. Your risks should be time or cost or scope. Of course, time to market is a very important thing, right? That's different. But in general, I think the risks should be more in terms of, right, will customers want a product like this? Will they use a product like this, right? Or will they find value and benefit in actually using a product like this, right? Is it solving some of your critical pains and things like that? So that was another important mind shift. So from a project manager to product manager shift perspective, these were very significant shifts in my experience, right? Starting to focus more on value and also starting to focus more on outcomes rather than the typical risks that a project manager would otherwise focus on. And second important misconception or a myth is also, I think there is a very, very slight difference between, how, at least within the organizations that I've seen, how they use the role product owner and a product manager, right? Something that we tend to use a little interchangeably as well, right? And the term product owner, as we might know, right, it kind of started evolving, when we started typically having this scrum practice and things like that. So in a setup like that, we wanted somebody to kind of own the backlog, both the product backlog as well as the sprint backlog, right? And somebody who can own it, prioritize it, execute it, and take care of the delivery, right? That's what we usually call what a product owner is, right? But while that's true, right, I think a product manager is definitely a little different. There are certain cases where a product manager can actually play, both. They can also manage, they might be managing the backlog as well, the sprint backlog. But as I originally told you, right, the more the product manager gets into a lot of administrative activities or core delivery execution activities, I think the lesser time that they have to really think about what really a product manager should keep focusing on, right? The big picture and the vision, right? So two things or misconceptions that I would definitely want to strike out. Product manager is not a project manager, not a product manager, a product owner. Those are two things that could come at the top of my mind in terms of what I wanted to kind of lay out there.
Okay, got it. So I think the value over velocity part kind of resonates with me as well, because time is very limited when it comes to a product manager's role, because there are so many people and business functions to kind of talk to, and that's the core of their role, to be able to bring everything together. So dedicating time to quantitative aspects might not be the core part of their function. But now that we have touched that point, right, of this distinguish between product and project, etc., can you help us understand a little bit more about the role of a product manager, especially in the context of IT? And if you can help talk a little bit about their roles and responsibilities across various stages of a product life cycle, that would also be very helpful.
Sure. So I think today in the setup where we have the Indian IT industries, and this, as you rightly said, the product manager role that's just evolving. In a typical product company, I think the product manager role is a little more clear, and I think people have no confusions in terms of what the responsibility of a product manager is, because they literally operate like the CEO of the product, right? Even where they're kind of spearheading the overall success of the product and the business, in terms taking control of the P&L responsibilities of the product as well. But when it comes to consulting organizations or other IT service organizations, even there we do have this product manager role, right? Where in most of the cases, we might be managing the product of our client, right? Or we're playing the role of a product manager on behalf of one of our customers whom we serve, who's building a product, right? But it's titled as a product manager, right? So in setups like that, at least based on what I have seen, I think it's more a product owner role rather than actually a product manager role, because if we don't have we don't own the vision, the overall product strategy, right, then the role that the individual is playing is more a product owner. But I think in a typical IT setup or in a consulting organization setup, that's usual, and that's the way it is, right? So at that point, it's more in terms of maintaining the backlog. But however, though it is a setup like that, I think there should be nothing stopping us from the product thinking. Right. Okay. While we might be actually in a product company or in a service company, a product manager is all about because one of the key skills that I think a product manager should have, in addition to the strategic thinking and all of things, is the core product thinking itself, right? Where your focus is always about the problem statement. And in products, we call it as a mother problem statement. At least I like to call that as a mother problem statement, because sometimes it's so easy that you get deviated from that and keep adding things, right? And you would have started with some vision and some purpose for your product, but at the end you would have a lot of other features, just adding on to it, right? So though we, in a typical IT setup where it is not a product company, in a consulting organization, we might play a product manager role. There's nothing that should hinder us from actually applying the product thinking, which will help us to actually make sure that we're able to do the best out of the role that we're trying to play. And there is another case as well, right? Typically like our setup now, right? For example, where sometimes there is this build or a buy decision, and we might be using a lot of off-the-shelf products, and you might see roles like product managers where your team is managing an off-the-shelf product, right? And there will be a product manager there, right? So I have a lot of times had my own questions. Okay, what does the role of a product manager mean in this, right? Because the product is anyway already built, right? Bare minimal probably will ask for some customizations we will own in terms of what we need and things like that. So what I've seen, right, in this is, right, how does a product manager play a difference is not just individually from a particular product perspective, but in a setup, right, in a setup like that, where there is a ecosystem, there's an IT ecosystem, and there are different products, right? So at that point in time, I think a product manager's role is more about the overall journey, right? Or the end-to-end customer experience across different systems. So that's where I think they have to kind of, transition their role rather than looking at it purely from an individual product perspective. So though the title might be the same, product manager, irrespective of a product company or a service company, or in the third setup, where typical internal setups or internet setups, where there are a lot of systems that we might build or buy, we might have a product manager role across. But how we kind of, make the difference in terms of giving value out of the role, I think is a little different. But the fundamental is still to keep the product thinking is what I would say.
Okay. So going back a little bit, when you spoke a little bit about the fine line between product ownership and product management, I just wanted to hear your thoughts around one experience that I personally observed, which is the role of a product owner is more around the just the overall supervision and a little bit about the delivery aspect, and it's more around being a proxy to the product manager of sorts. Like, is that something that you agree to?
A proxy to the product manager.
Yeah, I mean, just handling certain parts of product management. It's not the complete vision, because I've seen that product ownership is more around just making sure that the delivery and execution is a little bit smooth with some elements of probably iteration management and project management sort of mixed into it. But that's something that I've seen in a couple of occasions. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so when you say proxy to a product manager, in certain aspects I would agree, and there are certain areas where I might have to, probably disagree. And I'll tell you the reason for that, Rahul, right? So definitely, as you rightly pointed out, in a typical Scrum setup, or where we are running iterations or trying to move. So we have the product backlog, and then we have an iteration backlog. So somebody who owns prioritization as well within the backlog, right, and kind of delivers and makes sure the value is done, right? So that's the core or the crux of a product owner's role, right? So they do kind of, make some key decisions in terms of prioritizing within the backlog, right? Even though they might or might not have actually, be responsible for setting the overall vision. But where I kind of feel that a product manager kind of, comes in and adds difference and things like that is, while we're looking at it, because a product owner, right, most often doesn't involve in activities like, let's say, a typical market research, right, or looking at a competitive analysis, right, or let's say looking at some kind of a user research and interpreting that data in order to decide, right, what additional feature or which feature should go out of the list completely, or which feature might actually be worth deprecating because it's no longer of value, or things like that. Those are the areas that I feel, right, usually is more a responsibility of a product manager, because they are not about core day-to-day delivery or execution, right? They are more about the overall strategy and vision of the product itself. But a product owner, I don't think so, will have even the bandwidth to kind of look at it, because they are anyway looking at it in terms of, iteration by iteration, how can we make sure that we're managing the backlog, getting the stories ready to the team, and also making sure we're able to deliver the features out, right? So I would say it's a yes and a no, right? Of course, a proxy to the product manager on certain areas in terms of owning the backlog, prioritizing it, and making sure that the delivery happens. But on certain areas, right, they can actually play that role. There's nothing stopped, but I don't think so with the bandwidth of what is happening in the core products delivery, right? It gives them room for it.
Okay, so what we can say is that there is definitely a major overlap between a product manager and a product owner, but depending on the context of the organization or the project, there might be some activities where they might or might not, get their hands on.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, got it. Okay, so so now that we have spoken about what product management is, some of the myths and misconceptions, I think we are at a logical stage where we can probably talk a little bit about the skills that are needed for an aspiring product manager to be good. So can you give us an overview around that?
Sure, Rahul. So the first thing, at least in my perspective, is strategic thinking. Right, because when I say strategic thinking, this ties with having the right kind of insights into the market, the competition, the problem space, right, and making sure that they're devising the right strategy as a product manager that is aligned with the company's vision and also the product's vision. So first, I think it's that's what I would consider as a very key skill for a product manager, right? Because that's the most important, to make sure that we're able to strike a balance also between what is realistic, achievable, and also what's aligned with the vision of the organization. The next would be, as I already said, product thinking, right? That I feel is a very, very key skill for any product manager. Maybe I would just want to kind of elaborate a little more on product thinking, because we keep talking about design thinking, we keep talking about product thinking, and then sometimes we talk about service design, right? There are multiple things that we keep using as terms, right? So specifically on product thinking, at least to what I have understood and what I have kind of practiced in product thinking, is the first thing is mainly it's very important to love your problem rather than loving your own solution, right? Because I have seen myself, being a victim of, loving the solution that we developed, right? When I did the product right earlier, sometimes, you're so carried away by the product you build, right? The platform you build and things like that. And you just keep beautifying your product and feature set and things like that. It might leave you in a place, where you're completely off the problem statement that you started with, right? So product thinking is being very, very brutally aligned towards the problem space. Continuously keep loving the problem statement, and then just keep the focus on the problem statement and understanding more about that. So by that way, I think, we'll be able to kind of fine tune the solution, because otherwise I think, when the focus kind of shifts, right, when we don't think about the problem and start shifting the focus of the solution, that's where, the innovator bias, they call it the innovator bias, right? Where you always think, okay, oh yeah, this might work for everyone, and I think I have the cool solution out there, right? So that's one thing. And product thinking helps you to focus on the problem, and the problem is what actually pushes you to look at the market, pushes you to look at the competitors, pushes you mainly to look at the customers, what benefits and values that they would eventually get, right? So that's the first thing. So love the problem and not the solution, right? When I say product thinking, right? The second most important thing is also it must be to think in terms of product and not in terms of features, right? Sometimes I think, we're also, we can very easily get carried away by, okay, for every release, how many features are we, releasing out, right? So when we kind of lose the essence of product thinking and the focus on the problem statement, we might start looking at only the micro level details, right? But product thinking is always having the big picture in mind, not losing that vision, and not thinking at a feature level. Because if you're thinking at a feature level, eventually your product will become very bulky. It might have 1,001 features, right? But hardly anything would be used, right? So it's only that product thinking that will keep back and help you loop it back to the problem statement. So by that way, right, like the 80-20 rule, right, you wouldn't be really worried even about kind of, moving away a few features. You constantly look at the analytics, user analytics or product analytics. You constantly look at reviews and customer experience surveys and things like that, and keep making your product lean and start focusing more towards only what's needed for the product in terms of value, right? So that's a very, very important skill, right? So after strategic thinking, I think most important is definitely product thinking. And the other things are definitely a good understanding and interpretation of data, right? Especially for SaaS product managers, right? Product managers in SaaS, I think there needs to be this inclination to data. You need not be a data ninja, right? But being able to interpret, be it the user research data, or let's say usage stats, right? Or keeping the eye on specific KPI and metrics, right? It could be the churn rate, or it could be the net promoter score and things like that, right? Or usages and patterns, right? I think there definitely must be a product manager needs to have that general understanding of data and being able to infer from data and aligning it towards the product's vision. Those are largely the few things that could come to my mind in terms of most needed skills.
Okay. Great. So strategic thinking, product thinking, and the last one is basic data literacy, at least, to be able to kind of work with that. So these are probably, hard skills that we, definitely want to address. When it comes to, let's say, management skills, like I don't talk about management in the very typical, corporate sense, but more around, working with people and being able to probably work with different business functions. Any thoughts around, skills related to design or working with probably specialists? So of course, is it, there are again one more misconception or question that I keep coming around, which is, does a product manager need to understand how to be able to code or be able to, bring up very detailed wireframes and mockups? So if you can give us some idea about the tech and the design literacy as well.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very important one, and I could have missed that as well, Rahul. Thanks for bringing that up, right? So some of the additional misconceptions or myths, right? We spoke of, a product manager is not a project manager, not a product owner. There are a few other things as well. they're not a techie as well, right? But a basic understanding in terms of technology is definitely a value add in terms of being very realistic with in terms of what we expect and right, what we expect with the team, right? So they're definitely not a hands-on technology expert, and a product manager need not come up with a product's tech strategy, right? Maybe they're responsible for aligning the business strategy of why we're trying to do certain things, but they must be in a position to kind of just understand, right, and also drive the teams towards aligning with the right tech strategy for the product. They need not actually be the hands-on, right? And so definitely no necessity to be a techie. That's one important thing, right? The second thing, as you rightly said, I think I've also heard this, right? A product manager should have design capabilities, right? Being able to, design journeys and things like that. That again, I feel is not a responsibility of a product manager, right? But a product manager, as must definitely be able to kind of assess and review and work in conjunction with a experienced designer or a user experience person in terms of trying to help them focus towards the actual core or the crux of the problem statement of the persona whom we are trying to solve the problem for. Right? Because that has to come still from the product manager only, right? They need not necessarily be the person actually designing the experience or the journey map, right? But they must be in a position to validate, right? Okay, when something is done, okay, is this going to be within the golden circle of what we're trying to solve, right? Is this journey going to cut it in terms of giving that seamless experience? So they're not a hands-on, techie or a hands-on designer, but they have the right cues in terms of kind of giving the team the necessary inputs, or a partner in technology and a partner in a design, right? Where they work like a trio, right? The product manager, the tech strategist, and also the design person, in order to kind of together forming a solid strategy. In addition to that, there is also misconceptions that a product manager is a marketer, right? They are responsible for marketing their products. So that I kind of disagree with that as well. Of course, there is nobody who can articulate, right, the necessity and the need of a product, right, and what problem of the customer it is solving like a product manager. But then they are not necessarily the people who are actually going to the field and trying to market it. Though identifying the product market fit is one of the core things that a product manager should focus on, right? So hope that kind of helps in terms of what it's not, and what skills they need to hold as a hands-on expert versus just being able to take the right decisions.
True. And I think today the roles as well have become much more granular, because just one look at LinkedIn and you can see that companies are hiring for product designers, product marketers, and even companies that are specifically looking for product managers with technical skills, they're actually looking at technical product manager as a role. So I think roles today are getting much more well defined, but thanks for clarifying that common misconception or confusion rather, that product managers really need to know how to code or probably design, because those fields by themselves are so vast that even if we probably dip our pinkies there, I think we are just going to get dragged down and lose sight of the actual work that a product manager needs to focus their time on. So yeah, I think that helps clarify a lot. So probably one more thing that I would like to ask off topic is, if you look at coding or design, there are very specific courses. Like if you want to become a software engineer, there are CS or IT engineering degrees or other science degrees that people can do straight out of college, and you're equipped with some basic skills. And when it comes to design as well, there are specific colleges dedicated for design literacy. But when it comes to product management, there are actually no specific courses. Probably in some parts of the world, I think over the last 4 or 5 years, there are some courses that are coming up. We have some online courses that talk about it. But for someone looking to get straight into that, field probably as early on in their career as possible, how do they acquire these skills? Right? Is there any fixed path, or is it just purely based on experience that we acquire and then probably slowly transition into? How does that journey actually work?
I think that's a very interesting and also a tough question to Rahul, right? So, as you rightly said, there are no very specific and concrete courses in terms of, okay, how to acquire product management skills or something like that, right? But those individual things, for example, how to apply product thinking, right, and things like that, some of the skills that we saw that eventually kind of build up or make up a good product manager, those are available as separate skills and courses across different what do you say, digital learning platforms as online courses, right? But specifically in terms of trying to bundle it and package it very well like a course, right? Okay, how to become a product manager in X days or whatever, right? As you rightly said, I don't think so that's available so readily. At least maybe I'm unaware of that, Rahul. What I would probably from my experience, maybe for me, I didn't land in a product manager role. As I told you, I took up the business analyst, initially a developer and then a business analyst, right? So while playing a business analyst role, right, maybe the product manager BA roles have been there for more than 2 decades, right, or more, or even more than that, right? But the product manager role is not as early as that, right? So I think this all comes from a base of a combination of what a business analyst and a project manager is, right? But just that the focus kind of keeps changing, or at least we have more fine and defined boundaries, and that's how it gets shape up. So in my opinion, I think for somebody to start as a BA or as a business analyst, where there is a basic understanding in terms of, okay, how to manage your requirements, why are we doing certain things, asking those critical questions and trying to relate it back to the business values and outcomes and things like that, is actually a great start, right? And from there on, right, pivoting to a product manager and or a product owner, or eventually to a product strategist, right, actually feels to me like a very logical step, right? Rather than right away landing first place in product management, where it might kind of seemingly be a bit heavy, in my humble opinion, right? Unless and until we are pairing with somebody, right? So I think a progressive step makes a little more sense, rather than starting as a product manager. It's just my opinion, Rahul. Yeah.
Right. It definitely can be very overwhelming, if we are just burdened with all of the responsibilities, rather probably build a base of skill sets and then build on top of them.
Correct.
So okay, so I think I want to touch upon and probably get into a little bit more detail around one point that we spoke about earlier, which was, so we spoke briefly around the overlap between a product manager and a product owner's role. We spoke a little bit about project manager as well. Now I want to bring up this a topic that I personally myself have been kind of confused by, which is there are different roles that we see, especially in major FANG companies. Right, like we have a product manager, we have a project manager, and we have a program manager. And if you look at the job descriptions or the skill sets that they ask for, there is probably, I would say, 30 to 40% of overlap. But how do we distinguish between these roles, and how do we know whether a specific role is right for us or not? Like we might be fast, like let's say, for example, take myself. If let's say I feel that I'm very fascinated by the role of product management, but my skill sets might be more aligned with the role of a project manager or a product manager or a program manager, right? How do I identify and distinguish that and find the role that suits me best, or even a product owner for that matter? Like, how do we?
So maybe I will tackle the product manager first, right? In terms of how to even know if product management is a career line of career that I should kind of, choose, right? So if somebody is a person who has, of course, has a vision and is able to kind of, break down the vision into, tangible chunks, and also lay out a plan and can drive and fulfill the vision right till the end, right? That's how I see the journey of a product manager, right? So you start with the vision, you strategize for it, okay, then you plan, execute, you continuously keep, looping back in order to see, are you still trying to solve the fundamental problem that you started with for your customer? Is it proving out to be a value, right? Okay, so it's a tough journey, in my opinion, because I've experienced that in a product where first we failed, right? Sometimes it really leads to a lot of hard cries when your product doesn't actually scale up and nobody is there to use it, right? And then you get it right? You learn it the hard way, right? Only when you start focusing on your customer and not on your solution and things like that, right? So I definitely feel, I think the product management, there's a level of grit that's needed in order to take that particular role. So, but if you're somebody like, if there's a person who kind of feels that, okay, I need to carry out my vision, right, and see the end of it, right, and also learn in the journey and not be worried about, making mistakes and things like that, I think product manager is the right career choice for somebody who's, trying to look at it from that perspective. On the other hand, project manager is a very, very interesting and a responsible role as well, right? Where our focus is more in terms of just not, when it comes to a project manager, there's nothing that, in terms of as a core vision or a problem statement, it's mostly we're trying to make sure the delivery of a defined project, right, stay on track. Right, make sure that the teams are aligned, make sure that the customers is aligned. That's more in terms of a typical managing of multiple activities at the same time. So if a person is somebody who is kind of very organized, not saying that okay, product manager does not have to be organized, right, but in terms of being very organized and making sure they're able to keep multiple tracks on the at the same time running properly, right, and also being able to anticipate risks and have proper mitigation plans and things like that. And they like the idea of working with men and material and planning and things like that. And then probably project manager is more, right, they're not a product manager, right, because I see a very strong difference, though initially these roles could have actually be the same. Further down in terms of trying to understand and pick the difference, right. The third one that you spoke of was actually a program manager, right? I think different organizations have different titles, right, when it comes to program management, right? They all have, some call it as a program management when there is a particular client setup and there are multiple projects which are all logically grouped in order to kind of, finally drive a particular program's output together. So I just see it as a step above, project management or natural progression from project management in terms of being able to manage multiple projects that are actually contributing to a single program. So that's more aligned towards that. It's just a step up, right? So that's where I kind of see the difference in terms of, I would put product management at completely in a different bucket, right? And project management and program management probably another lane, right, where I see that as a more of a progression. You also asked about product owner, but I think as we already spoke of, right, that might probably in the product management lane, right, where initially it's more focused on core delivery and execution, and eventually when it becomes a product management role, it's more about market insights, research, right, competitive analysis, user reviews and things like that, right, and also what's needed for the product, right. Eventually it'll also, when it moves to a product strategist, of course, as we might start looking at pricing strategy for the product, right, a lot of other things as well, right? The measures of success and things like that. But I think at least I'm able to see the clear differentiation between the two lanes, the project program lane and the product owner, product management lane.
Okay, got it. Got it. So there is one more question that I wanted to ask around, just out of curiosity. So I'm assuming that I think you worked on a product right from scratch, and been in that journey, right till the end. And also you've taken on products that were kind of in the evolved or a little bit mature stage, and someone handed over the reins to you from there. So how has your role, or how does your role change in such contexts, especially if it's a situation where the product that you manage is like already in an evolved state? So where do you go from there? Is it just like just a very minimal management and hands-off kind of approach to product management when it comes to taking over an evolved product, or how does it change?
So with my experience with the former one that you spoke of, right, that is actually building a product from scratch, right? Obviously, that actually is pretty heavy, and because you start initially in terms of what problem statement, what target segment, right? You understand your market, you understand your high level TAM, SAM, and SOM of the market, right? The addressable market, the obtainable, and right. So there's a lot of base work, right? On a very high level, the difference that I have experienced in playing a product manager role, right, in a product that I had to start from scratch and eventually drive it, and also now playing a product manager of a product that's already has already evolved and it's continuing to evolve. The activities in terms of the different lanes, they don't change, but the intensity, right, in terms of what we do, right, I think it kind of differs. For example, right, for a product manager who's starting fresh with a product, right, initial few months, right, most of the time I spent was mainly in market research, right, mainly in talking to potential users or target users, right, or looking at some analyst reports in terms of what might work. So a lot of it is actually external understanding and things like that. But in an evolved product, right, or in an already existing product, right, as a product manager, I see myself spending more effort in terms of, okay, now the existing customers, right, what kind of experience do they already have, right? What are their feedbacks? Is it giving them the respective, the needed feedback and things like that? So the skills and the activities, might look on a high level the same, but the intensity of what we do, I think kind of, largely differs, where in the other product, there is a constant focus and there is a heavy focus on the market and things like that, while you're trying to still shape up your own product and its journey. But for an evolved product, I think it's more in terms of, your customer, those metrics, and then trying to see how we can kind of keep enhancing it.
Got it. Okay. So I think we've covered a lot of points through this interview, Sujana. Probably towards the last section, I would want to understand from you. Let's say if somebody is aspiring to get into product management, where should one get started? What is the right logical point to start building these skills or picking up these skills, and how do we go about approaching this attempt to get into product management?
Sure. So the way I see is, now at a base level, if you look at any IT role setup, there are multiple roles, like, let's say developer, quality analyst, or let's say a digital marketing analyst, right, business analyst, a lot of things, right? A lot of roles that people kind of enter into initially, right, and then kind of eventually choose the their progression. In my opinion, I do not see any role that cannot be a base role even before somebody kind of, chooses product management as their career choice, right? Or their eventual progression. A developer can actually become a product manager, or a BA can be a product manager, a quality analyst can become a product manager, because underlying, I think we're all problem solvers. I feel that's the crux of it, right? How we solve the problem kind of differs. Sometimes we solve it by, coding and giving a solution to it. Sometimes we solve by making sure something that's coded is effective, right? Sometimes we solve by making sure that people are able to find what we have solved properly through a search engine, right? That's what is different. But ultimately, I think we're all solving a problem. So as long as the thirst and the drive to actually solve a problem and look at a problem mainly analytically, right? Analytical understanding of a problem statement in order to arrive at a solution and things like that. I think a product management is something that somebody can choose. So the starting point, I don't think so, is actually there are any restrictions in terms of who can eventually choose a product management as a career line of choice. But now that, okay, you could, someone could be in playing any of these roles, right? As I already told you, how to decide if product management is the right line of choice for us, as definitely, somebody who can actually take a vision, lay it out into tangible chunks, right? And slowly, see it through its progress. And especially for products that we start from scratch, I would say patience, perseverance, and grit, right? In addition to all those core skills that we spoke of, right? These are three things that I feel is so, of course, it's needed for every role, right? And I completely agree. But in product management, I've seen all these put to test in me. So much, right? Because sometimes you also kind of, there's a point when you start kind of, you're mothering your products so much, right? You're not willing to let it go, right? So I think there are certain things that we have to learn in the journey, which I don't think so a course or a books or things like that could actually kind of bring in that teaching, right? If the basic problem solving is there, yeah, and if you are somebody who wants to carry out a vision in terms of laying it out and trying to see its closure, right, then product management is definitely a good career choice. And what can drive you towards it is just being open and being bold to take up that challenge, right? If ever we see that, okay, I'm somebody who can take it up, just being bold to take up the challenge, and then not being afraid of failing, but just keep moving on is what I would kind of probably humbly recommend, Rahul.
Awesome. Great. Okay. One last question probably.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite products that you come across in the industry today that you love using, and what you like about them?
My favorite products. Oh, that's an interesting question. I've actually, of course, Gmail is something that I've always admired, right? The reason for that is because being in IT every day, a lot of time that we spend is actually in terms of communications that we receive and send back and things like that. So that's because now, especially if you look at me, I spend at least 40% of my daily effort on the Google Workspace, specifically Gmail, right? So the way it's evolving, right, and sometimes you might think that, okay, it would be great if there is something like this, and eventually you'll see that there, right, coming up in the product upgrade, right? So definitely Gmail is something that I've admired as a product, mainly because that's something that I've used, right? And it's not that I don't have any other choice, right? Even if I've had a choice, right, I would still use the Gmail because I've admired its usability and the way it's kind of shaping up and things like that, right? So that's one thing. And initially when WhatsApp came, right,
Yeah.
I really loved that simplicity. I didn't know how could somebody, all of a sudden, because those are all kind of, where in products they usually say either you're the first one and you're a leader and you try to prove yourself, or you're just trying to give alpha a run for their money, right? But
Right.
WhatsApp was just trying to come up, trying to be an alpha in their space. And the very first version of it itself, I was kind of, really fancied by the very simple user experience, right? Anybody could just take it and use it. And I was kind of taken back in terms of the capabilities, just hardly 3-4 functions, right? But you could do very powerful things, right? So I would say, these two are something that I've admired a lot.
Awesome. And I think one more app that really stands out for me is Microsoft Teams. I've been using it for the last 4 to 5 months, and compared to Zoom, I think the kind of functionalities that it offers is so much better, and it solves real problems. Like if I'm in a meeting in Zoom, once the meeting is over, I really can't save chats and refer back to them. I need to save them in a text file which is somewhere sitting on my desktop, which I may or may not lose or refer back to again. But with Microsoft Teams, if I have like a recurring session, then there is a continuous flow of chat that is recorded and documented over there. And I can even send files and do multiple things over there. And that track record is always there, especially the meeting recording is available as part of the chat. So I think they're doing some really interesting stuff, and especially they're customizing it by doing brand collaborations as well. Like recently, I think just last night, Samsung rolled out their foldable phones, I think version 3, and Microsoft has customized Teams to work seamlessly with their foldable screen, where they've made a lot of enhancements, features specifically for Galaxy. So I think it's a really exciting time to be in product management. And
absolutely, especially to see the evolution of some of those products, right? As you rightly said, interesting. And I think this is it's a wonderful stream to be in product management. There's absolutely no doubt, Rahul.
Awesome. Great. So thank you so much for your time, Sujana. This has been a great discussion. Anything that you would like to say in closing?
That's all, Rahul. Thank you so much for picking my brains on a lot of things, right? A lot of things was a re-emphasis for myself, right? In terms of things that I should keep in mind as I continue in the product management career. So I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed the structure, right? In terms of how you kind of, carried this whole discussion. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sujana. And thank you everyone, to whoever gets to watch it. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.